Welcome back, pod people. Hi, everybody.
Hey guys, welcome back. And this is Diz.
And this is Trigger Warning.
Trigger Warning!
All right, I have a mystery for everybody today.
Ooh, yay.
Before I get into it, first I'm going to say our email real quick, because I haven't done that
in a hot minute.
Yeah, so our email is triggerwarning411@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out and say hello. And then I'm also going to tell you the trigger warnings for this episode, because there are a few.
Okay.
So we have missing person. We have a brief mention of conspiracy regarding secret societies.
Okay.
Possible mental health issues involving paranoia.
Okay.
Death and descriptions of injuries.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I guess I'll just dive in unless you have any questions or concerns or threats or anything you want to make against me or anything like that today, Diz?
Absolutely not, Beth. I'm good.
Okay.
You just jump right in, girl.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. So, we are talking about Rey Omar Rivera. And he was born June 10th, 1973, to parents Angel and Maria Rivera. He was born in Madrid, Spain. Rey's father was actually in the Air Force, so the Rivera family moved around a lot. This made his mom, dad, Rey, his younger sister, and his older brother a really tight-knit group, because the only constant in their lives was each other. They were actually Puerto Rican descent.
Oh, okay.
And they were really proud of their Puerto Rican heritage. In 2004, Rey married his fiancée Allison in Puerto Rico on the beach.
Oh.
She called it magical. So, Rey's brother Angel Rivera Jr. said it was one of the happiest times together for the Rivera family. At the time, Rey and Allison were actually living in Southern California, and Rey was a writer and dreamed of writing and directing movies.
Cool.
So until he was able to sell a screenplay, though, his income, of course, would be a little bit unstable.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, Rey had actually been getting offers from his best friend, Porter Stansberry, to come work for him. And Rey and Porter had been friends since they were around 15. But the job meant moving across the country to Maryland.
Oh, wow.
So 6 months after getting married, with no deal in sight for a screenplay, Rey and Allison discussed the idea and decided they would give it a shot. So Rey accepted the job from his friend, and Stansberry's company, Stansberry and Associates, was actually owned by Agora Publishing. The job Rey accepted was as a writer, but instead of writing screenplays, he'd be writing a newsletter called Rebound Report for Stansberry's company. And the newsletter was actually sent out to clients of the company, and it offered advice on stocks that had dropped, but looks like they might bounce back soon.
Rebound. Okay.
Rebound, yeah.
Okay.
So Rey and Allison moved to Baltimore, Maryland in September of 2004, and they agreed that they would live there for about 24 months to see how things worked out and kind of go from there. So when they moved across the country, the only person they knew in Baltimore was Rey's friend, Porter.
Wow.
But they bought a house, they found a church, they made new friends, and they started building a life for themselves. They were really happy. They were very much in love, according to Allison. So, on May 16th, 2006, Rey got up with Allison and made her breakfast. She was getting ready to make a 3-hour drive to Richmond, Virginia for a business trip.
Mm-hmm.
He carried her suitcase to the car, and she told him, "I love you so much." And he replied, "Thank you for loving me so much." When Allison finished her work later that evening, she checked into her hotel and she called Rey, but he didn't answer. After trying a few more times, she was a little bit confused, and a work colleague of Allison's, Claudia, I think maybe a former work colleague, she didn't specify, but Claudia had actually arrived at the Rivera home and was actually staying at their house for her own work trip that day and that night. So Allison had called Claudia. She had gotten there around 4 o'clock that afternoon. and was going to spend the night there and then leave the next day to go back home on her work trip.
Okay.
So Allison called her to check in, and Claudia told her that she'd been resting in the guest room next to Ray's office, and she heard him answer a phone call. And she said he spoke with the caller for a moment. She couldn't really hear the conversation. She could hear him talking, but couldn't hear what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And she heard him say something like, "Oh," or "Oh, shit." And then Claudia said he basically hurried out of the house. So she checked around and told Allison it looked like he hadn't come back home yet. So the next morning, Claudia called Allison again around 5:30 in the morning and said, "Ray is not back. He never came back." So Allison canceled the rest of her work trip and drove home. She said she was not the type to panic, but she could tell something was not right.
Yeah.
So on her way home, she called Ray's mother, Maria, and told her she couldn't find Ray. She also called Ray's brother, Angel, who then got on a flight from Florida to Maryland early that same afternoon.
Wow.
Angel told Unsolved Mysteries that Ray just wasn't the type to up and leave, especially without telling Allison where he was going.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone knew right away something was just seriously wrong. When Allison got home, she saw that Ray's Invisalign, the clear braces kind of thing that you have, was on the kitchen counter, along with an open drink can and a bag of chips. The lights were on in the bedroom and in his office, and Ray's car wasn't in the driveway. So it looked like he literally just left the house.
Yeah.
Soon, the Rivera dining room basically became the HQ for Allison, her parents, Ray's mom, who flew in from California, and his siblings, and a few of their friends. The family discovered that the phone call Ray had received had come from his work, but the call had actually been routed through the switchboard, so there was no way to tell which extension had called him. They weren't sure who called.
Okay.
So they did everything they could think of to try to track him down. They called hospitals looking for John Doe's. They printed and hung flyers. They passed out flyers around town. They went to restaurants and coffee shops that Ray frequented or that were nearby. They interviewed the staff at restaurants and stuff. They stopped people on the streets. They asked anybody they could if they'd seen Ray. Ray was also about 6'5".
Oh my gosh.
So
it's
they
not
figured
easy
he would
for him to
stand out.
hide.
Yeah. Porter Stansberry offered, it was either $1,000 or a $5,000 reward for information, depending on the source, for information and finding his friend, and got media involved in the story as well.
Fantastic. We like that.
Yeah. The two families and their friends also went out in teams searching parking lots for Ray's vehicle. So Ray's bank accounts actually had not been used. His cell phone was no longer in use, and it was turned off. He had basically just vanished into thin air. So on May 22nd, so this was the 16th to the 22nd, Allison's parents went out driving around, checking parking lots, and Allison's mother spotted Ray's vehicle.
Wow.
It was in a paid parking lot in spot number 7, and the parking attendant had actually ticketed it on the morning of May 17th, the morning after Ray had left the house in a hurry, which meant that the car had been there since the 16th. The parking attendant arrived on the morning of the 17th, and it was still there from the 16th, so it got a ticket for being parked there overnight.
Okay.
The car was not damaged. Nothing was missing in it. It was locked, and it was otherwise completely normal. His phone was not in the vehicle. Also missing was the money clip that Allison had given him as a gift. I think it was a wedding gift. It was engraved with RR on it, his initials. And Allison and Ray's family all confirmed that Ray loved it and he carried it with him all the time. So Allison told Unsolved Mysteries that she stood in the parking spot where his car was and looked around at all the buildings, wondering to herself, why were you here? Why? And just kind of spun in a circle, looking at all the buildings, thinking, why were you here? The lot was kind of near Stansberry and Associates, so Ray was familiar with the general area, but without knowing who had called him, there was no way to know why he'd been there that night. A journalist for the local news, Jane Martin, told Unsolved Mysteries that interest in his case really picked up at that point because they finally had a clue about where he was at that point. So Another 2 days passed with the family searching the vicinity around the car had been, where the car had been. They continued handing out flyers, asking people in restaurants and coffee shops if they'd seen Rey. Now they kind of had a search area.
Yeah.
Since Rey had worked nearby, some of the people recognized him, but no one had seen him the evening he'd gone missing. On May 24th, 2016, 3 work colleagues decided to go up on the top floor of a parking garage nearby, kind of hoping to get a bird's eye view of the area to see if anything gave them a clue or a direction to kind of head in next. The garage was directly next to the Belvedere. It was a 14-floor historic building that had once been a hotel, but it had been converted to condominiums by then.
Okay.
And at first, their new point of view didn't really do much, but then they noticed something odd. They could see a hole in the roof of the building next to them. And it was basically just a black spot and an expanse of white on the roof. The roof was an extension of the second floor of the Belvedere.
Mm-hmm.
And the second floor basically housed like conference rooms and stuff that weren't used anymore. So the floor just kind of came out further than the other floors of the hotel.
Interesting. Okay.
The hole was odd, but what really kind of caught their attention were a few items laying near the hole. A pair of flip-flops, a cell phone, and glasses. So Rey's family and the police asked the Belvedere if they could take a look in the building. And when the police were let in, they were confronted with the unmistakable smell of death. And they finally found Rey. Rey's body was in an unused conference room, lying beneath the hole in the roof. He had been dead for a while, likely the entire time he'd been missing. The police removed Rey's body and the items on the roof and told the family that they suspected that Rey had committed suicide. It was their determination that he had jumped from the roof of the Belvedere to his death, but Allison and Rey's family didn't believe that Rey had killed himself. Now, there are 2 main theories about the death of Rey Rivera. Like I already mentioned, the police suspected that Rey committed suicide. Allison and Rey's family believed that he was murdered. The internet's pretty divided between suicide and murder, but the theories about who murdered him vary from far-fetched to full-on conspiracy.
Okay.
All I can really do is give you what I found from several sources and let you form your own opinion.
Right.
So, let's look at the death from the perspective of murder first. So, according to their house guest, Rey left the house very suddenly the evening he disappeared. And as Allison pointed out to Unsolved Mysteries, she basically said he wouldn't suddenly be like, quote, "Oops, it's 6:30, time to go jump from a tall building." Legit point.
A valid point. Absolutely.
The call that evening that he got came from a switchboard at Agora Publishing, which was the parent company of Stansbury and Associates.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, it couldn't be traced to a specific person at the company. No one ever came forward to say that they made that call, as far as what I could find. Rey had been writing the Rebound Report newsletter and was feeling kind of bad that some of the stocks that he wrote about hadn't actually bounced back. And so he was kind of upset that the people that trusted what he'd written might have lost money. Porter Stansbury had actually had a case brought against him by the SEC, which is the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, in 2002 for securities fraud. In 2007, after Rey's death, the case was finalized, and Porter actually was ordered to pay $1.5 million for punishment for that.
Oh, my.
According to Allison, part of Rey's job when he was hired was to help clean up Porter's image a little. So,
Porter, you're not looking so hot, friend.
Yeah. So, according to the episode of Unsolved Mysteries, a gag order was placed on the employees of Stansbury and Associates as soon as Rey's body was found. Between this, the fact that his car was near their offices, and the fact that the call that pushed him to leave the house that night came from the company's switchboard, it is a little suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
Allison also says that Rey had been acting strangely protective of her in the couple of weeks before he went missing. They had made a trip to California to plan their move back there when Rey's behavior had changed. When they returned to Baltimore, he began accompanying her everywhere she went, as if he needed to be there to make sure she was okay. Once she had been jogging, making laps around a running track, and Rey sat nearby as she did her usual routine, but freaked out when an unknown man approached. Nothing ended up happening that day, luckily, but Rey's behavior never went back to normal. Around 1 a.m. on May 15th, which was the night before Rey disappeared, the alarm went off at their house. And Allison went to investigate and was shocked to see Rey come around the corner with a baseball bat. She said the fear on his face was something she'd never seen before, and it was terrifying.
Oh my gosh.
They called the police, and the police checked the window that the alarm had been triggered at, and they said it must have been a squirrel. So the same window was triggered again around the same time the next night, May 16th. So this would have been 1 a.m. on the day that Rey ended up disappearing.
Okay.
Once again, the police said that likely it was a squirrel. And Allison had no reason to doubt that until Rey went missing later that same day. So when Rey's body was discovered, Allison had questions for the medical examiner and set up a meeting. And she told Unsolved Mysteries that the medical examiner told her, "I know what they're trying to do, and we are not closing this case." Allison added that the medical examiner told her that Rey had injuries not consistent with a fall. The inconsistency was with the way his shins were broken, according to Allison's recollection of her conversation with the ME. But she said they didn't elaborate beyond that. The medical examiner that did Rey's autopsy did say he had injuries consistent with a fall, but ruled his death as undetermined. Reporters, Rey's family, one of the detectives interviewed by Unsolved Mysteries, and people on the internet all agree that this is suspicious. There are questions about whether the medical examiner is being forced to cover something up in Rey's death, and that the closest she can get to in telling the truth is ruling the case as undetermined. Allison explained to Unsolved Mysteries that even if Rey was suicidal, he wouldn't have chosen that way to die, as both she and Rey were afraid of heights. She'd been on the roof of the Belvedere after they found Rey and said it scared her to death. She said she couldn't imagine Rey choosing to jump from that height as a way of killing himself. Angel told Unsolved Mysteries that access to the roof is limited, with a locked door on the roof and restricted access to some of the staircases, and he said he tried to walk into the building and make his way up to the roof without, assistance from hotel staff or whatever, to try to go up to the roof, and he said he couldn't do it. But police and family members have never found anyone living or working at the Belvedere that can confirm that they saw or spoke to Rey that day or that evening. Another suspicious issue was that the camera on the roof of the Belvedere was disconnected on the night of May 16th. When the police attempted to get footage from inside the hotel, they discovered that the footage was recorded over after only 7 days. So any footage of Rey was gone since it took them 8 days to find him. Lastly, because of the shape of the roof, there is a 43-foot or 13.1 meter expanse from the edge of the main roof to the area above the hole of the second building that Rey was found in. This means that Rey would have to run at roughly 11 miles per hour or 4.9 meters per second across the roof to clear that expanse and make that jump to reach where he fell through that second building. And that is possible for someone as tall and athletic as he was. But he was wearing flip-flops.
And they were still there.
So that makes it more questionable and makes some people wonder if he was pushed or thrown from the roof. And Allison points out that one of his flip-flops has drag marks on the front of it, and the other flip-flop strap is completely torn loose. Rey's phone and his glasses were actually found near the hole that his body had allegedly made. His glasses are fine. They weren't bent. The frames weren't bent. The glasses, the lens are not broken. His cell phone is not broken. It was in working order when they found it. She, Angel, and other people who think that he was murdered believe that the items on the roof were staged. Also, Allison said she searched the entire car after it was found and couldn't find the money clip she'd given to Ray, the one that he always carried with him. And it wasn't found with his phone, the flip-flops, the glasses, whatever, or with his body. It's missing. It's never been found. So if he killed himself, it should have been at home, in the car, or with him, but it has never been found. So Allison insists someone would have had to push Ray off the roof. Possibly have stolen, I guess, the money clip. So she said at that time they had been married only 6 months. They were happy. Ray couldn't wait to start a family with her. He wanted to be a dad more than anything. They were extremely happy. And those who believe that Ray was murdered wonder if he possibly got caught up in something related to securities fraud or discovered some kind of information he wasn't supposed to know and was silenced. And Allison said she just isn't sure what he could possibly have found out that would have been worth killing him over. Angel, Ray's older brother, agrees that his brother didn't kill himself and that Ray was likely murdered due to something related to his job at Stansbury and Associates.
Wow.
There's another theory about Ray being murdered that's come up online. So, before Ray's car was found, Allison and Ray's family were searching every inch of the house looking for a clue as to where he might have gone.
Mm-hmm.
They came across some papers taped to the back of Ray's computer in his office. The paper was in 3 pieces, wrapped in plastic, and what was written on them was really freaking odd, to say the least. The writing was very small and typed, not handwritten. One portion was a list of people that the couple knew, but there were some names that weren't included that surprised Allison because they were people that were like really close with them.
Mm-hmm.
Included with the list of names was a request to make the people 5 years younger, and it included Ray. So it was a list of a bunch of random people, not necessarily like the people that they were closest to, and then it was like, it said something about making them younger. There were a list of actors on the papers, and a list of movies that Ray liked. And then one of the first lines in the document was a line that Allison looked up immediately because it was very unique. And the line says, "Whom virtue unites, death cannot separate." So Allison searched it on Google, and the phrase came up with an association with the Freemasons.
Mm-hmm.
So Allison said that Ray did have a fascination with secret societies and things like that. He had actually purchased a couple of books about the Freemasons before his death. And he had actually gone to visit a Masonic lodge the day he disappeared and spoke to one of the members there. They interviewed the member that he spoke to, and he said that Ray was polite and curious and did not seem to be interested in conspiracy stuff. The conspiracy theorists, however, say that the association with the Freemasons and other things on that note related to director M. Night Shyamalan are clues that Ray was involved with or investigating a secret society and somehow got caught up in something that led to him being murdered. I didn't even go down that rabbit hole because
Wow.
I was like, that's too much for me.
That's a little bit too much. Yeah, wow.
So a lot of people, of course, think that's just completely ludicrous and whatever. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I didn't even jump on that ludicrous, like that rabbit hole, because that was just too much for me to get into.
Right.
But Ray was a writer, so Allison said no, he wrote things everywhere, in no particular order, whenever, wherever they came to him. She said he had little notes, ideas written all over the place on random pieces of paper. They could range from a phone number to a philosophical thought to a plot point for a screenplay. She said, they were all over the place.
Yeah.
So it didn't necessarily mean anything. And she said she knows he wrote those little papers that the day he disappeared because the pieces of the paper had been cut down to such a small size. And the leftover scraps were in the trash can, but they weren't there before she left for her work trip.
Gotcha.
It's possible that he was brainstorming for a screenplay.
That's what I was just getting ready to say.
Like about a secret society or the Freemasons specifically.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible he taped them to the back of the computer as a way to, like, get into the mindset of his screenplay or secret societies. Many people believe that the note means nothing,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of random scribblings of a creative mind. But the other side of the argument says the note is instead evidence of a mind that is fracturing. For those that believe that Rey committed suicide, they see his actions in the couple of weeks before May 16th as proof of paranoid delusions rather than signs that he was in danger. So let's shift now to the idea that Rey committed suicide. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit reviewed the papers found behind Rey's computer. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this because there are other podcasts that have actually done a deep dive into this case.
Mm-hmm.
And I got some of this information and access to some of these documents from them.
Okay.
I'm going to link them in the show notes and let y'all, like, read those and go wild with it if you want to. Basically, the FBI said that the writing is consistent with someone who likely had a persecutory delusional disorder, was suffering from bipolar disorder, experiencing an untreated manic episode, and to a lesser extent, consistent with someone who suffers from schizophrenia. They also note that the person may have a mental illness that they are able to hide from family, friends, and coworkers. Rey's sudden overprotective nature of Allison, the aggressive reaction to the man when she was jogging, they could have been signs of slow mental breakdown. The 2 nights in a row of the alarm going off very well could have been squirrels with an unfortunate sense of timing. And those bushy-tailed little jerks could have just fed into his paranoia, just driving him further into a psychotic episode. It could have been coincidentally just tripping him up. So if Rey had lost touch with reality, it's possible that he could have jumped from the roof of the Belvedere without realizing what he was doing. And it's possible he wasn't even trying to kill himself. In the delusion, who knows what he was doing or seeing or believing.
Right.
The phone call Rey got the evening he disappeared came from the switchboard at work, but not from Stansberry and Associates. Stansberry and Associates was owned by Agora Publishing, but Rey had actually resigned from Stansberry 6 months prior to his disappearance. He was still working for Agora Publishing as a contract worker. And according to the other podcasts that I mentioned, the call came from the Fells Point neighborhood of Baltimore. And from what I can tell from a quick Google search, that's not even where Agora Publishing is located. So if anybody's familiar with Baltimore, please tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like the phone call didn't even have anything to do with his job at all. It may have just come from some other random, completely different thing.
So he wasn't working for...
He wasn't even working for his...
Did his wife know this?
I think so. He was working for the company that owned Stansberry and Associates. Right. And he did contract work for them, but he wasn't working for his friend's company anymore. Hadn't been for 6 months.
Wow.
And they were getting ready to move back to California.
Yeah.
Because their 2 years was going to be up in September. So, in addition to that, Porter Stansberry said that the night Rey disappeared, everyone that had worked with Rey at his company was at a company retreat on the Eastern Shore, so none of them could have called him through the switchboard. And the gag order, quote unquote, that was placed on the employees at Stansberry's company, Porter said what he actually told his employees was to forward all media inquiries to a company spokesperson, which is a common thing for companies to do.
Which makes complete sense.
That way they aren't getting conflicting information.
Right.
And that is very different than telling your employees they can't talk to the police or the media.
Yeah.
So, according to a book written about the case, that the podcast I mentioned before, they cited it. I have not read this book. Rey's death left Allison in debt to the tune of $90,000.
Oh my gosh.
Allison felt that Porter Stansberry should have compensated her for this debt, but Porter refused. And supposedly Allison attempted to sell the story as a screenplay before reaching out to Unsolved Mysteries. And it's really disappointing because I grew up watching Unsolved Mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
to think that this show that so many people love, would skew the truth for ratings, but it looks like that's what they did. They played up the angles to make the mystery more mysterious. And one of the angles was the way that Rey died. So, it might be difficult for us to believe that Rey ran at 11 miles per hour and leapt 43 feet in flip-flops, but it's less likely that a person, or even several people, threw a 6'5", 250-pound man that distance.
That is a very, very valid point.
And for those that don't use U.S. measurements, that's 198 centimeters and 113 kilograms.
Yeah, that's...
If you think about the longest distance that you can jump, and then imagine throwing someone else your size that far, which do you think is more believable? Some people have suggested that Rey was pushed out of a helicopter. I think people are watching too many movies.
Well, that doesn't explain why his cell phone's laying there and his glasses are laying right near this hole and that kind of thing.
The thing about the glasses and the cell phone, my glasses I have stepped on. I dropped them the other day. The lens popped out. I popped it back in.
Mm-hmm.
I have dropped my cell phone numerous times. It hasn't broken. If it fell out right before he went through the building,
yeah,
it could have popped out of his pocket right as he was going through the building. I mean, weird things happen.
Right. Well, it could have been in his hand.
As far as the helicopter thing, if Rey had been paranoid, whether due to mental illness or because someone was actually out to get him, he would never have gotten into a helicopter.
Right.
Especially with people who might have pushed him out of it. As for the access to the roof, it turns out it was not all that restricted either. The elevator was usually unlocked. Fire doors were not set to alarm when opened. And the security cameras didn't always work. Bartenders on the 13th floor of the Belvedere would use the roof to smoke, so the door to the roof was left unlocked for them to access. And that camera up there didn't always work anyway. It wasn't always on. When it comes to the fear of heights, Rey may have had a fear of heights, but a beautiful place to watch the sunset apparently outweighed that fear. Because not only had Rey been on the roof of the Belvedere for that purpose before, both he and Allison had gone together at least twice to watch the sunset on the roof of the Belvedere in the past.
What the heck is going on?
And on the evening he disappeared, Rey's computer had been left on, and a website was pulled up showing when the sun was supposed to set that day. So that makes me wonder if he hung up the phone, saw the sunset was soon, and his rush from the house was because he knew he needed to hurry if he didn't want to miss it. And that was his, oh shit, and ran out of the house. Rey's family and friends say that Rey had no history of mental illness. But because they thought of him that way, his behaviors leading up to his disappearance seemed to be legitimate concerns from a sane and stable man. Unsolved Mysteries briefly mentioned the FBI's analysis of the writings found behind Rey's computer, stating that the FBI agreed it was not a suicide note. But they did not mention that the Behavioral Analysis Unit considered the note to be a sign of Rey's diminishing mental health. They just said that it was not a suicide note. They didn't say that it was signs of deteriorating mental health.
Come on, Unsolved Mysteries.
I know, it makes me really sad. The show also misrepresented the autopsy findings. The statement that the way Rey's shins were broken was inconsistent with a fall simply is not true. The autopsy report says, quote, abrasions of upper and lower extremities, lacerations of the lower extremities, fractures of the right tibia and fibula. It goes on to say that his cause of death was, quote, injuries at the time of autopsy were consistent with a fall from a height, end quote. The medical examiner ruled the death as undetermined, causing many people to put their conspiracy theory caps on. But as the autopsy report clearly states, quote, because the circumstances surrounding the incident are unclear and it is not known how the deceased came to have precipitated from such a height, the manner of death is best classified as undetermined. In the case of an autopsy, the medical examiner has two things to determine. They have to decide the cause of death, so what made the body stop working, and the manner of death. Why did the cause of death happen? So if you have a body in the morgue with a knife in their spleen, then the cause of death is likely due to blood loss from the knife in the spleen. The manner of death in the case could be murder, suicide, or an accident. So the medical examiner can use other information to determine which one it is. If there isn't enough information to figure it out, then it's listed as undetermined. In Rey's case, his cause of death was trauma from the fall, but there was no way for the medical examiner to tell what caused his fall. His death being listed as undetermined is not unusual and not suspicious. So everyone can put their conspiracy theory caps away and just calm down. So this is where I'm going to shout out the podcast I've mentioned a couple times so far. Check out the Prosecutor's Podcast is what it's called. I'll link it in the show notes. I feel like we could never live up to their standards. These are actually former prosecutors.
Fantastic.
And they have done a deep dive in this case, and all the cases on theirs, they had a copy of the autopsy report for this. So there's no way. I mean, you can pay for records because it's all public, but you have to pay for it. And I'm sorry, we're not famous enough for me to pay for this stuff. So I would never have been able to look at this stuff. So props to them. They're amazing. I'm going to have to start listening to them too. So they had a lot, they had the report online. They had really useful information. So Rey Rivera died in what was likely a suicide. His case has turned into a conspiracy, with people discussing his last day and his body like they're pieces of a puzzle rather than the remainders of a life. Armchair detectives and people who suddenly think they're doctors have decided that Rey's injuries weren't indicative of falling from a 13 or 14-story building. So let me spell it out for you. And Rey's shins were the least of his injuries. Along with the abrasions of his arms and legs, lacerations of legs, and fractures of both of the bones on his lower right leg, with bone protruding through the skin, Rey had the following brutal injuries: contusion of the chest, abrasions of the torso, fractures of both collarbones, fractured sternum, multiple rib fractures, lacerations of the pulmonary trunk, which is the artery from the heart to the lungs, the atrial septum, which is the piece of tissue that separates the left and right atria, which are chambers of the heart, and a laceration of the left and right ventricles of the heart, which are also chambers of the heart. Contusions to both lungs, lacerations to the lungs, liver, and right groin, a fracture of the right pelvis, and a hemorrhage of the right testicle. Abrasion and laceration of the forehead, fractures of the maxilla, the zygomatic bones, and the mandible, avulsion of the mandibular teeth, multiple skull fractures, multiple base of skull fractures, subgaleal hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, and hemorrhage of the anterior neck muscles. Now tell me, his entire face was broken.
Yeah.
His entire skull broken. His sternum, his ribs, his lungs lacerated.
Yeah.
His heart lacerated. He was torn to pieces. I'm not a doctor, but it sounds like he fell from a height.
Yeah, it does.
And people want to say, oh, but all of his injuries were on one side, or all of his injuries don't sound like he fell from a roof, or it sounds like his shins weren't. What?
It sounds like there wasn't a part of him that wasn't damaged.
It was brutal. So, from everything that I've read, and I'm not saying that I'm an expert, but I have my own educated guess about what might have happened that evening.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ray got a phone call that evening. Maybe work-related, maybe not, but it didn't really matter. Allison had gone on her trip. They had a house guest. So he decided he was going to go watch the sunset. As he hung up the phone, he realized he'd have to hurry to get to the Belvedere in time to make it up to the roof to see the sunset. So Claudia heard him say, "Oh," or "oh shit," or whatever it was, and head downstairs and out the door. Ray had been having some paranoid thoughts lately, and maybe that night he wasn't. Maybe he was okay. Maybe not. Either way, he parked in spot number 7, and he was hurrying toward the Belvedere. Maybe someone stopped him. Maybe someone mugged him. Maybe they took his money clip. And maybe that was the moment that triggered a mental health crisis for him. All that paranoia that had been bothering him before, that could have been the turning point, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
In his mind, he knew his destination was the roof of the Belvedere. But now, instead of going for the beauty of the sunset, he wasn't sure what he was running toward or who he was running from. And maybe that's what led to what he was doing and where he ended up. And that's just my guess. And that's all it's ever going to be. So Ray's case has turned into a conspiracy theory, but it could have been more. It could have been an example of why sudden changes of behavior are red flags. And it could have taught us how to see red flags for what they are when your loved ones are good at hiding their darker sides. I hope that Ray was in a delusional state when he jumped. I hope that he thought he was flying and was free. And I hope he felt no fear. I hope that his family and friends are able to move on from this tragedy. And I hope that Ray rests in peace. And that's the story of Rey Omar Rivera.
That. I don't even have words right at this moment. It is amazing how twisted things can get.
When you start reading about it, it's really easy to find stuff online that leans it towards the mystery and the conspiracy.
Right.
And it's so easy to find that stuff. But when you start really diving into it and looking at it with an open mind,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that just points to, just the simple thought of, do you really think somebody threw him 43 feet?
Yeah.
It's simple to,
if you
it's
really
like, yeah,
think
of course
about that,
not. Of course they didn't.
Right.
He's 250 pounds.
Who could do that?
Yeah. And the shape of that hole in that building was fairly small. He went through it like a bullet. He was not splayed out. And the damage to his head and face.
Yeah.
He went through it straight down almost. He dove. That's why I say I hope he was delusional.
Yeah, me
imagining
too.
something. Imagining he played water polo. Maybe he thought he was diving. I don't know. I don't know. They were talking about not being able to find his money clip, and I thought maybe somebody mugged him, and that triggered
something.
This psychotic break. And he knew in his head he was going up to the roof of the Belvedere, and then it tripped him up, you know?
Yeah. That's just as plausible as anything else.
Yeah.
More so, probably.
Probably, yeah.
The frustrating thing is that we won't ever really know.
We won't. Because they found every bit of evidence that they can find.
Yeah.
The cameras only record for 7 days, and then they re-record. And that's not unusual. It's a condominium.
That's normal, yeah.
They can't, it's just hallways of people coming in and out of their apartments. They're not
like
going to keep the footage forever because there's nothing to see except people walking up and down halls. Of course they're not going to keep that footage for a long time.
And especially in certain areas, it's like,
yeah.
Especially if just, the people working at the bar would go up on the roof or whatever. Or
Yeah, to
were
smoke
really
and stuff.
allowed to.
Yeah.
Because like the people who
And it's
were
probably
staying,
one of those things where they're not allowed to, but they
but
just
they
kind of
just
like,
do.
yeah, they just kind of let it go and they just do it.
Yeah.
They're on the 13th floor. It's a lot easier for them to take a 5-minute smoke break than to take however many minutes it would take to go all the way downstairs and go outside.
And smoke and then come all the way back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just hard to think that at least no one has come forward to say they saw him.
Yeah.
But then.
And they say, well, nobody saw him falling. And it's like, well, if it was, after 6 or whatever, and he went up there, if the sun was setting, so he was going up there, it was dusk. People are getting home from work. They're changing clothes. They're fixing dinner. They're not paying attention. And if he was doing this out of a delusion or on purpose, he wasn't screaming.
Right.
Right.
And
he would have gone by so quickly. They might have thought, did I just see something go past the window? But they wouldn't have thought anything of it.
Yeah.
There's no reason why they would have seen something go by.
Exactly.
They would have maybe saw something out of the corner of their eye and thought it was a bird.
A bird. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. There's drones and everything flying through the air right now. Nobody would have necessarily seen. They would have had to been standing there watching him fall.
Right.
To know that something was wrong. So it's not that big of a deal to think that somebody didn't see him fall or hear him yell or something. He may not have yelled. He probably didn't if he was delusional.
Well, especially
or
if he was
suicidal. I don't necessarily think that he did it intentionally to kill himself. I think it may have been part of a delusion.
Yeah.
I think something may have triggered him to do it. Like I said, the thought of that money clip, them not finding it, made me think somebody may have stolen it.
And you were saying that he left her with like $90,000.
Uh-huh.
What is that from?
I don't know, but they moved there thinking they'd only be there for 2 years, but they bought a house.
That's what I was thinking when you said that earlier.
If you are thinking you're only going to be there for a couple of years, why not rent a place?
Would you? Yeah, and then if you rent even an apartment.
Yeah, if you get there and at the end of the 2 years you're thinking, yeah, we're going to stay, then looking to buy in a house. I wouldn't buy a house when I first moved there, but I mean, young couples have debt. They had a freaking wedding in Puerto Rico, so who knows?
That's a good point. Yeah.
They just moved, so they may have had debt to move across the country. A credit card debt. Who knows? But it took her like a decade to pay it off, and she thought his friend should pay her for it, I guess, because he moved there to take that job, or I don't know. So I don't know if some of the stuff said about him was a beef because of the money thing. And then I don't know, too, how much of that was just for the show to make it sound...
Well, yeah.
Maybe she didn't really feel that way about Porter, and it just was... They just edited it to make it more... scandalous for the show or sensational for the show. Yeah.
Which is really sad, especially like this is a serious situation.
Yeah. So
I hope that that's not how she feels.
I know. And I'm sad that I hope that Unsolved Mysteries hasn't always been that way. But
I know.
I mean, I understand the ratings and skewing it a little bit to kind of make it a little more exciting, but I hope that they haven't always been that way.
But it's like it's already a true story.
Yeah.
Why can't that be enough?
Yeah. But and it's already sad, and they don't know if it was suicide. They don't know if it was a delusion, if he had some kind of mental health crisis, and I guess, yeah, sure, it could have been murder still. We don't know, but like, all the evidence says probably not.
Yeah.
But, it's still sad because he was missing for all those days and it was just kind of sudden. So I get why, like, you would want to do a story about it anyway and just be like, does anybody have any information as to why this happened?
Yeah.
I would want answers too.
Mm-hmm.
But, so it's such a sad story, and I just wanted to share that. And when I saw all the confusion about it and why it's considered the mysterious death of Rey Rivera. And I at first I thought that too, and I was back and forth. And then the more I got into the research, I thought this isn't a mystery.
Well, and when you see
It's
that
just
autopsy
sad.
findings, the
Yeah.
actual true findings.
Yeah, and I've linked the link to the autopsy report itself, because of course there's detail to everything in there, but
Yeah.
there's just, I mean, his poor body just, it was sad.
It was battered.
It was. He, I mean, I hope he died. He must have died instantly.
I hope he did.
Between the hemorrhages in his brain, his
And
heart being lacerated, and that kind of thing, I hope that it was.
I don't think he could have lived very long anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was Rey Rivera. Rest in peace, Rey.
You guys let us know what you think.
He had a great smile too. The pictures of him, he looked like. I feel for him. I hope he wasn't like. I hope he wasn't mentally tortured in his mind. At the end, I hope he was feeling free and flying in his mind, because he looked like he was a really kind, sweet person. That's sad.
That is sad. Well, I mean, thank you for bringing that story to us.
You're welcome.
And making us aware of
Rey.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah. And I guess we'll leave you on that note.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming back. We hope you come back again next week.
Yeah, and we hope that you do that thing that Diz is going to tell you.
Don't forget, you guys, as always, watch for deer.